Okay, so this is episode 4 of the Tight 5 Stories from the Second Row, and today we've got Dan Gruenpeter from Bottle Tree Pictures. He's a co-owner, business development extraordinaire, and he's been kind enough to answer my 5 questions. Thanks for joining us, Dan.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be here.
All right, so you have a very cosmopolitan history that we've chatted about before. How'd you end up settling here in the United States?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in short, my better half, my husband ended up getting a job. Firstly, in Chicago, was actually supposed to be in upstate New York, but didn't get that role, but ended up being Chicago, which was the amazing consolation prize.
Yeah, that's a win for you.
Yeah, so that was definitely a win. So yeah, ended up firstly in Chicago, which we spent a great year and a half. I think I still find it was too short of a time because it was such a great place. But then that job took us to Boston, where I think I really formulated my career here. And yeah, obviously met my business partners when we worked at a local rental house, which is a great stepping stone into the Boston film community. And then we as time went on, decided to set up a production business. And then basically was in Boston for 6 years, and then ended up in the Bay Area, just south of San Francisco. So now in California.
So Dan, as a bit of background, could you maybe share a bit of your journey before you got to Chicago in terms of where you were born and where you were brought up?
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm a very mixed bag, which, to the outside world is very diverse, but within, Jewish culture, it's actually not such an amazing kind of thing, because we all mix from everywhere. But yeah, my background is very varied. I was born in South Africa in 1980, excuse me, where I lived as for the first few years of my life with a South African mother and an Israeli father of German background, and I'll go into that shortly. But yeah, both of Jewish descent. But ended up moving at the age of 5 in 1986 to Australia, where I spent most of my life and grew up. So I would consider myself, nationally as an Australian. I grew up there. It's where home is right now. I've still got a connection, I guess, to South Africa. I guess that never really goes away. But I spent most of my life from your first year of primary school, and I finished high school in Australia, and ended up going to university as well. Strangely not even touching in the film industry, and studying human resource management, which again, don't know where that goes. Oh, and international relations and politics, which is I think is my true love.
Yeah.
And then after university, spent 6 years in the UK, where I actually got into the film industry, working for Arri Media back then, or Arri Rental as it is known now, for 6 years. And yeah, I fell into that industry, and with luck, to be honest. Went back to Australia, spent a few years, and yeah, subsequently the United States then came up as an option to move. It was never on the cards. And we decided to take the big leap into the US.
Where did you meet your husband?
We met in London in 2010. So it was a year that's the year we went back. It was my last year there. And that was just, at the tail end of the recession, the 2008 global, what we call it in Australia, the global financial crisis, but the big recession, as we all thought back then, and big crisis. So yeah, it was that year, 2010 was a big year, which we decided to make the move back to Australia. And I think it was a really good move in hindsight. I think it both kickstarted and jumped our careers to go back and then to move forward again.
So you get back to, you come to the States, right? Boston, my local town here, and started to get into video and understand that. And why does and videos become such a popular way to communicate your message over the last few years? Why do you think that has so much power versus other kinds of content?
I think video is, you can actually see it, and it's sort of, you can, and a video is, as opposed to like blogs or podcasts, I think of, being visual gives it that extra bit of power. But strangely, there is obviously the visual side of it, and we all sort of, being on the video side, we end up but also being able to, the sound plays a big part of that as well. So you can have something really nice visually, but if sound doesn't work, then the whole thing gets distorted. But I think if you have both a visual and a sound piece that is meshed together, I think it just gives you a vision of the subject. And I think it's easier for learning and easier to pick things up, if that makes sense.
And it's probably also been driven by the power of social media too.
Correct.
And it is a way to kind of, text can only go so far, as much as I love it.
Oh, 100%. And on that note, I think with social media, I think our attention spans have become, I think in general, have become a lot shorter since the advent. We don't have time anymore, sadly, I think in some respects, to sit and focus on something for more, dare I say it, more than half an hour these days, probably even less. So
Yeah.
You've really got to, with the advent of social media, you've really got to get your message out in a pretty quick, concise way before you lose people as well. So that's been an interesting way to sort of reshape what we do and to how to be effective as well.
Okay. I know you've been asked this question a number of times. What exactly does a producer do?
That is a very good question. I'm learning that every day. Look, I think it's a very broad role. And what I've learned while I've been running a production company and running a business, it's a very varied role. I think the term producer can mean a lot of things. I can definitely speak to within our organization. So I really see my role in our organization is, I've got my amazing business partners who are creatives, who have amazing vision. I wish I had more of a vision myself. I'm one of those people, I walk into a construction site, and if somebody shows me where a room is going to be, I can't really visualize it. So yeah. I've got two great business partners who can, and one of them, Alex, has got a great creative vision, who can put things together, who has got that vision to piece and conceptualize something from a client there as well. So I think in our business, the role of the producer is to ensure that I can support my creatives and my creative business partners, and make sure that obviously projects that we do on case-by-case basis, make sure it's within budget. Again, we have to run a business, so to make sure it's somewhat profitable and we can live, to be honest, make sure we can get a salary. That's on one thing. I always say a big part of my role is to herd. It's like herding cats, because I love creatives, but like you sometimes have to sort of make sure they get in line on the business aspects of things as well. So I think generally my business, it consists of business administration, it consists of business development, it's client relationship management, it's budget management, it's ensuring that we can make a salary and make a living out of particular jobs that we do. So I would say myself and my specialty is more in line production, line producing, production management, as opposed to creative producing. But to be honest, as the years go on and, running this business, I'm learning more on the creative side, which is definitely, part of, I think every day in every job that we do, every day is a learning curve. And you should stay in that job as long as you're still learning every day. So I think on myself, I'm learning the creative producing side every day, as it goes on.
Now, earlier we talked about your varied background in terms of how you travel and the different places you've called home. And it's always amazed me, you have a contact in almost every part of the world whenever we've talked about doing projects together. Like, sure, I know somebody in Mumbai. Sure, I know someone in Tokyo. Sure, I know somebody in Mexico City. How has that background kind of been able to, have you brought that background to like your work as a producer? Is there ways that you've seen that kind of happen?
Yeah, it's starting to. I'd love to do more international work. Yeah, I was very fortunate. I think, and I think because of my varied background, from, being born in one country and having family living in multiple countries around the world, I've been fortunate enough. I've been fortunate enough, I think, to be an immigrant, right? And I think, and to be an immigrant in multiple countries, because it gives you meet a lot of people and people who know people. So your network grows, and my network has been growing since I was quite young. So I've been very fortunate, and I actually think because of my background, and unfortunately, some respects, having to move countries wasn't, out of choice. It was out of necessity. It was to get a better life initially. But that's been part of my family's history for generations. I think, I don't think we've lived in a country for more than 2 generations since the late 1800s, to be honest. So we've really been 2 generations and then moved on, and that's sort of been how we've been. And I don't think my story is very different to other Jews around the world. We've always moved around. But I actually think it's been a real big benefit. So it opens up your mind to different cultures, different ways of life. I'm actually, strangely enough. So yes, I was South African born. I've got an Israeli father. I grew up in Australia. I'm now in the US, but I'm also German. So my dad's of German descent. So I took up my German passport a couple of years ago through COVID. It was my COVID project. I mean, that's given me ability now to, obviously I've got US, I can work in Australia and the European Union. But yeah, I think with that background, I've been able to network quite a lot in multiple countries. I've always just enjoyed having an international existence. To me, the world is large. We've got to just, try and do a lot more, especially these days. Go across borders to do more business, and not just for financial gain, but also for cultural gain, for to bring the borders down more than what they should be, especially these days. And I'm sorry, Matt, can you just ask me that question again? I think I might have gone off piece there.
No, I think it went fine. I like where it went. I'm happy to ask it to you again, but I like where it went. It kind of got to what I was talking about in terms of, like, as I've said, like, a producer, you're used to almost any type of engagement, whether it be talking one-on-one with a client, understanding their broad needs. You've had to be adaptable in all these different cultures you lived in. And it's almost like being dropped into a film project, and like you have a client has one thing, the creatives have another thing, the thing you're shooting has a whole other, and it's logistically all over the place.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So you kind of got around to it, but that's kind of the fun of the conversation, right?
So
Yeah. So don't worry about it. So you were talking about COVID, and this is to the fourth question I sent you. You spent a little bit of time getting your German passport and getting an EU passport. What are some of the impacts you've seen from a business perspective, some of the communities you work with? Are people liking video more? Is it a way to communicate? Do they understand now that they've been talking over Zoom? We've never met each other. We've met each other in person, but we've had so many Zoom conversations. That's how we 100%. Met. So, like, do you find your business in terms of video, perhaps professionally, has been able to, grow a little bit more because people understand what video can do?
I definitely think there definitely. I actually even sort of related back to the last question as well. I remember when we first met, it was when you were in a previous job as well, and we did a production virtually in Tokyo in Japan. So we so that was the power of cross-border, using connections around the world to try and make something work, but we couldn't physically be in the same room, but yet we could make it happen and shoot a proper looking interview.
You had a person in Tokyo, as I said.
Yeah, we had a person in Tokyo ready to go, and actually met them for the first time when I was in Japan,
right, which was virtual too.
Yeah, Hide, who was a camera op, and Richard, who we worked with out of Tokyo. So I met them 2 weeks ago, because the world was reopened again. But with them again, it was I utilizing my network to find them. We were tasked with, as you know, to go and shoot a gentleman who was high up in Toyota, at their offices in COVID in Japan, where rules were way more strict than the US. And this shoot was one of typical of that time, and probably the best one we did of that time. I was based, I think the first year I was based in Boston. We were all based in Boston. Second year I was based in San Francisco. Business partners were in Boston. We then had to find a crew in Tokyo, which we did through my network, through contacts. Met the crew within a day. Of having the brief, we had a crew ready to go to the Toyota offices in Tokyo to go and shoot, while we would all log on. Online, and at 1 a.m. I think we did. We
1
did
or 2 in the morning. Yeah, I know.
And that was really powerful in itself. That we were able to direct from being away. We didn't have to go to Tokyo to shoot it. It was great. It was great at that time. I think from a business perspective, and I think from the client perspective, it was great because they didn't have to pay for flights for us to go over to shoot. So it was cost effective, and we shot and we did it well. But I still have to look back on that and go, still, the world nearly lost the power of getting together and because we're all in different parts of the world and we couldn't do anything,
Right.
So while it worked and it was great for COVID and it was powerful on how we shot it, and we still shot a decent looking piece, we were still, we still weren't able to get together and cross those cultural boundaries had it been normal times, but that was, I think that, shoots like that just show the impact of video and how powerful it is, and how technology, you can still get things done in really adverse situations. You can still shoot a video, which is powerful in itself, in a time when you can't actually get anywhere. So I think through that, video, and also video in the COVID times, we did a lot of jobs that were taking place of live shoots. So, video presentations, video sales kickoffs, great at those times, and, sort of great for business at those times when we could do stuff. But on the flip side, it was powerful back then. Is that still powerful these days? I think people now just are yearning to get together.
In some ways, it helps you realize what you miss. You were just talking about Tokyo, and we did do this kind of logistical high wire act of all these different places where we were shooting it from. But still, a couple of weeks ago, you were in Tokyo because you wanted to get together with those people, and you had the opportunity to, and it brought you closer together.
Exactly. And ironically, we actually stayed like across the road to where we shot.
Right.
And so what I'd seen on screen, I was there in person, and we were right there, staying on top of Tokyo Station, and we shot just there, So, but the power of actually getting together and, and meeting people who I hadn't seen in flesh was amazing, and that crossed over boundaries. And, again, that's the power of travel as well as video, is you learn a lot about people on screen, but then when you see them in person, it's like, wow, okay, we all the same,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, we've gotten together for lunch a couple times just because it's brought us, I think, closer together.
Exactly.
Those bonds, although I think I have to pay the next tab. I think that's if I remember correctly.
You should have got the star, that's what I always say.
So finishing things up, and thanks for taking the time. What book or author has been a touchstone for you through your career as you've been traveling around? I know you mentioned you had 2 or 3. Pick 1 or 2 that really kind of touch your heart and have kind of been a guiding light for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna probably go for 3 just because, there
he goes.
A bit difficult,
Good.
So I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'm a definite history buff. So, I think from personal interest side, I mean, this is not so much on career, but Simon Sebag Montefiore, who does a lot of books on the Russian Revolution, Stalin, and Russian history would be one. I just love how we indulge, and I love documentary making, and I think we are sort of our business is going into. I'd like to think that we're going more into the documentary space. 2023 has been a year that we've jumped into documentary. We've done, we did one in South Africa, in Soweto, which was really a life-changing experience, I think, personally. We've got a few others on the docket that we're in production for. And I love Simon Sebag Montefiore because, again, documentary, I think, is for me and is a way to give back. And I think I like the idea of doing video and to educate people through video, which I guess that relates to what we were talking about before.
Yeah.
And documentary does that to me. So Simon Sebag Montefiore, even when I see him on screen and his books, I just get lost in the world of history and documentary.
We've got one.
What was that, sorry?
We've got one now.
Got one.
Number two. I can't wait to hear number two.
As a business leader, I'm going to have to say Steve Jobs. Main reason being, now I've literally settled down the road to where he was born in Mountain View, California. So yeah, his childhood home is literally around the corner here. But I'm always a big fan, being an immigrant myself, of immigrant history and immigrant success stories. Although he himself isn't an immigrant, his parents are. And I think, to be able to jump into a world, being an immigrant is, you leave something behind, and you're set at a disadvantage, but something that works within immigrant souls that pushes them, gives them drive to succeed. And I think that's definitely with Steve Jobs, to build what he built, from his background, and just a great thinker, and I think obviously, in my opinion, differs from some of the tech people around today that are still successful, but I don't know, he seems to build he built Apple, so there's nothing more I can really say on that. And then political, I'd have to say Nelson Mandela. I mean, I just think I think myself, somebody that has suffered anxiety issues in the past, having to deal with them. People like Nelson Mandela put life into perspective. So, and just in terms of, leadership wise, I think, somebody that can be dished out the worst of the worst of humanity, can really be so forgiving and actually just lead from the top, and, create like a group of followers. I think, is something that can be, that should be looked at. And I think, so he would definitely be my political kind of thinker, and I'll put him in the world of political thinkers of our times, cool. And I think, I just get very I just look at him and I go, what am I suffering anxiety for? I've got really no worries compared to what other people have gone through. So
perspective and sacrifice is definitely a lesson he's taught many people.
And calm leadership, so just to be calm and slow and steady, wins the race, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, Dan, thanks for spending some time and answering my questions. It was a fun conversation.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, that was great.
All right. Cheers. Lunch is on me next time, promise.
Oh, I look forward to it.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.